Welcome to the Freedom to Learn podcast. I'm your host, Ginny Gentles. This season, we're diving into what it means to return education to states, communities, and families. And we're exploring what becomes possible when education is freed from union dominance and federal control. Last month, the U.S. Treasury Department created a formal process for governors to opt in to participate in the federal scholarship tax credit. And last week, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin became the first governor to officially opt in, paving the way for Virginia's K-12 students to benefit from tax credit-funded scholarships for approved education expenses starting in 2027. Governors of both parties have communicated their intent to participate, so expect more opt-in announcements soon. In this week's episode of Freedom to Learn, Kate Baker Demers, Executive Director of Children's Scholarship Fund New Hampshire, joins me to explore what the federal scholarship tax credit will mean for families nationwide. Kate also shares how New Hampshire built a universal education freedom system and how parents' frustration with COVID-era school closures fueled the creation of the state's education freedom accounts. Kate Baker Demers, welcome to Freedom to Learn.
Thank you so much for having me today. So excited to be with you.
I'm really excited that we're starting the new year here, a big year for education freedom with this conversation. And let's dive in. You run Children's Scholarship Fund New Hampshire. Historically, Children's Scholarship Fund was a privately funded scholarship program, but you all have expanded your role over time. So walk us through a little bit of the CSF history.
Fun. I'd love to tell you how I ended up here. So first started on this journey, of course, with my own children and my personal experience having challenges finding the right education environments for them. That drew me to working with parent groups on charter schools in New Hampshire. And I don't know how much your listeners or viewers know about charter schools, but they're tuition-free public schools, but they operate by lottery. And so I sat as the board chair of a charter school in New Hampshire for 3 years watching those lotteries happen. And we would have, it was small school. I mean, it's New Hampshire, so everything is small by perspective, just so you understand. But we would have, 30 seats available in the school and 100 children would apply and 30 children would get the seats and then 70 children would cry. And after watching this for 3 years, my friend was in the New Hampshire legislature, and I don't know how much you know about New Hampshire, but we have the third largest legislative body in the English-speaking world at 420.
It's huge.
Yes. So it's not like other places where you say, I know a legislator, and it's like, there's this joie de vivre around it. In New Hampshire, you kind of can trip over them in your own neighborhood. So it just so happens that my friend was in the New Hampshire legislature, and he showed me the education tax credit scholarship idea. And I said to him, okay, this would be amazing if you got this passed, but like what happens after you get a law like this passed? Like there's no infrastructure, there's nothing that would, make it actually help families. And he said, well, Kate, you should quit your job and start the scholarship fund if I get it passed. And I said, listen, if you can get this passed, and I was thinking like pigs flying, that kind of thing. If you can get it passed, I'll quit my job and start the scholarship fund.
And what year are we in at this point?
And this is 2012.
Okay.
So it passes the House, it passes the Senate, and the governor at the time vetoed it. He was a Democrat. He vetoed it. So I thought, okay, I'm off the hook. Like, I'm just going to not do anything. And then the legislature overrode the governor's veto and put the education tax credit into place. And like a crazy person, I quit my job and started the scholarship fund in New Hampshire.
Well, promises are promises.
That's right. Promises are promises. Kate Baker Demers keeps her word. And the first 3 years of implementing this in New Hampshire was all controversial. So when I did this, I didn't understand that it was controversial until I was doing the job. And then, the teachers union sued the state, the legislature kept trying to. So the first 3 years was really just it went from, I wanted to help kids with scholarships. I thought it was a great idea and figured I'd be able to, help a lot of children, turned into, battle after battle after battle. So I didn't really get very far. By about 2015, I was raising about 200 $100,000 a year and helping about 100 kids. That's the point where I went to Children's Scholarship Fund to ask them for best practices and support, because it was small and I was really struggling. In these programs, the legislature generally puts a little bit of money allowable for administrative costs. And in New Hampshire, it's up to 10%. But when you're raising $200,000, 10% is $20,000. So it was really difficult. But I went to Children's Scholarship Fund and asked for their help. And Darla Rumfo saw the potential. I think that, knowing that there were kids to help here, but that I didn't have the infrastructure or assistance to be able to do it, that's when I became part of Children's Scholarship Fund in 2016, and then was able to have the infrastructure to be able to grow the programs to what they are today. And then you'll remember we got to about $1.2 million. We were helping about 700 kids in New Hampshire. And then the pandemic hit. And so everything closed down. I'm sure you remember. It was devastating to families, devastating to children, devastating to special needs children. I mean, it was really an emergency and a disaster. And I just kept working because, clearly I do this work just to help families and kids. I mean, I'm one of them, right? Just a renegade mommy who, ended up in this job. So I just kept answering the telephone, the entire summer, and ended up that year with the 600 kids we had helped and then 800 children on the wait list. Wow. And so it was that group of families and the New Hampshire legislature that then drove the Education Freedom Account into being. So that was when the legislature realized they should allow that small piece of state education funding to follow the child, because those children were not in buildings, or they wanted to go to buildings that were open. The private schools were open at that time. The public schools were closed. And the outpouring was from, people working at the grocery store. You'll remember during that time, the people in the grocery store were still ringing up our groceries, but they had nowhere for their children to be during the day. Nurses, police officers, delivery drivers, the LNAs in the nursing homes. I mean, those people drove this Education Freedom Account into being because they needed that money to be able to pay for the education resources that existed for them during the pandemic. And that's when our Education Freedom Account passed. And now here in New Hampshire, we have 10,600 children with Education Freedom Accounts, and still just a little under 1,000 children with the scholarships. So it's been really amazing in New Hampshire to watch. It's funny because we're very conservative here. We're very old school. New England is we don't like to change, but for some reason in education, we're innovative. So it's been amazing.
So you mean conservative in that reluctance to change way versus a political
we don't
way.
like change here. We would keep everything the same. But in education, we're quite innovative. For example, when our education tax credit law passed in 2012, we were the first state in the nation to include homeschoolers in our school choice program. And so our education tax credit scholarship looks a lot like an ESA already. It's a multi-use. And so we were kind of the precursor to all of those ESA programs in the nation.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit. We sometimes assume that folks know our acronyms and know our terms, and we're happy to be ever increasing our audience here at Freedom to Learn. So let's revisit those terms. When we're talking about an education savings account, or you all call them education freedom accounts.
We do, with a blue die in New Hampshire. Yep. First state.
Totally appropriate.
Totally appropriate. That's right.
Yes. So an education savings account, as you were saying, that's broader than just a scholarship for private school tuition. What are some examples of what students are using those for?
So I'll define the two of them just so your audience understands. So the first program, remember we discussed, was our education tax credit scholarship. Mm-hmm. That's contributions that people make to the scholarship organization. And then they can get a tax credit against our state business taxes. You remember in New Hampshire, we don't have income tax or sales tax. So the only tax credit the state can offer really is against business taxes in New Hampshire. So a business can donate to scholarships for kids and they get a tax credit against their business taxes. So that's one program that we run, again, with that privately funded or raised money from contributions. Mm-hmm. Then in addition to that, we run our state's education savings account. And that money is the child's per pupil funding that would otherwise go to their district school if they went there, or in New Hampshire to a charter school if they went there. And now it can go also into their education, we call freedom account, but the policy name for it is an education savings account. It's a small amount of money in New Hampshire. The way our education funding works is, number one, all of the families in our education savings account program still pay all of their full local property taxes to support their district schools. They're sacrificing, kind of paying twice in that regard. They're paying still for their local district schools and foregoing that. They're only using the state portion of the money, which in New Hampshire is only about $4,000. So they're, foregoing that local tax and only using the state portion of the money, which again can follow the child. If they went to a different town, it would go there instead of their, for example, if you move from town to town, it already follows you, or to charter school, or to the education freedom account. And then that money goes into a digital wallet and it's a multi-use grant. So you can use it to pay tuition. You could use it to pay for college courses. Say you're a 12th grader and you want to do a dual enrollment program. You could use it for online education. We see a lot of students, for example, I remember one child who lives on a farm in Loudon in a rural area of New Hampshire, but he's attending the Stanford Online High School out of Stanford University in Cal. So it's very cool. You can buy textbooks and curriculum or your computer if you need that.
So we've got the education savings accounts, education freedom accounts, as well as the accounts funded by the tax credit. And it's clear that there was a high demand. You said over 10,000 students benefiting from the EFA?
Yes. So the way that our legislature has changed the law since they implemented it in 2021, they first put it into place with income limits. It was for families 300% of the poverty line. And then the subsequent year, they went to 350% of the poverty line. And then this past year, they removed the income limits entirely. So they made it universal, again, for every child in the state. And if you think about it, that makes sense. Because remember, it's the child's state education funding that would otherwise follow them to a public school or follow them to a charter school. And when you walk up to the door of the public school or a charter school, they don't say, "Are you low income?" Okay, you're low income, you can come here. They don't. It's for everyone, right? And so it made sense that the legislature removed the income limits to allow the child to access their rightful education funding. They did cap the total program at 10,000 students, with the exception of we can always enroll a low-income family. So they created priority groups. They said your cap is 10,000, but you can always enroll a low-income family or a child with special needs. And that makes good sense. I mean, again, the whole reason for being of Children's Scholarship Fund is to be able to help low and moderate income children to access the education that they need to thrive and the education that's the right fit for them. I mean, these are our future leaders in our world. And so to be able to allow us to always enroll a low-income child or always enroll a special needs child makes good sense. And then they put an escalator. So the number of students will increase every year by 25% if we reach the cap, and we reached the cap this past year of 10,000. So we'll continue to be able to grow and always be able to enroll our most vulnerable students.
Are there varying levels of funding that different students generate? I think about in Florida, a student with special needs generates more funding, and that varies actually by the level of need. Is that the case in New Hampshire as well?
It works like that also. Yes, it's a stack. It's the state funding, which is a stack of money, same money that would go again to the public school or charter school if they went there. There's a base amount. And then if you have a qualifying disability, you're a special needs child, you get a little bit more. And if you're a low income child, you get a little bit more. And so it
Gotcha.
is just like that. So, again, so that the program helps the families that are the most vulnerable in a meaningful way. We can also give low income families a scholarship from the private donations that we receive. And so it helps a little bit because, as I described, the dollars are not very large. The state funding is not a very big piece of the pie. And so in New Hampshire, they were thinking ahead, and they did make it so that for a low income family, we can also give them one of our tax credit scholarships from that private money that people have donated.
Okay, so they're stacking the tax credit scholarship with the education freedom account, and
Yes.
that's giving them more buying power for
Yes,
the
because
education
imagine
option.
if you're a family earning $40,000 a year, you're a delivery driver, right? One of our families that again drove this into being, and your tuition at private school is, say it's even $8,000, and your education freedom account is only, whatever, $4,000. You still need to make up that gap. And so that's where the contributions that people make to Children's Scholarship Fund in New Hampshire are extremely meaningful, because they'll bridge that gap between the state funding and what someone may need to be able to afford to make those decisions that they really want to really realize those dreams.
I'm wondering if the federal scholarship tax credit can play a role in helping those families as well. Is
We're
that
hopeful that is the case. We're hopeful because, again, our education freedom account is small dollars, and the scholarships average about $3,000. And so when you're a low income family, you really need every piece of this to be able to make it work. And so in New Hampshire, there's definitely a need and still a remaining gap that the opportunity for that fundraising through the new federal tax credit could be really, again, meaningful to these families for sure.
well, Kate, what you're saying sounds very different than what the union narrative is around the federal scholarship tax credit. And unions are out there, it always seems like first, and they're out there the loudest. They seem to have the ear of a lot of policymakers. And their narrative is that basically all of these school choice programs, education freedom programs, but specifically the federal scholarship tax credit, well, it's a federal voucher for wealthy families. But I don't hear you saying that
I
that's
mean,
what this is.
I do fundraising here at Children's Scholarship Fund, and so and have experience running our state tax credit program, which looks very similar to the federal program, where someone makes a contribution and then they can minus it on their taxes. The people making the contribution, number one, want to dedicate money to education, and that's an extremely honorable and valuable trait that these, particularly in New Hampshire, it's business leaders. Remember, our tax credit is against their business taxes. They're taking and dedicating these funds so that children in their community can have the education that's the right fit for them. I mean, they're thinking about their future employees and wanting their future employees to be academically prepared for leadership positions. And so people making contributions completely to education, and even if it was, for example, if I was able to go to my tax burden on my tax return and say, please use my tax for education. I mean, I think that makes perfect sense, to be able to contribute your own money, to be able to contribute whatever tax you might pay and dedicate that money to education. I mean, that's transformational to our future. I mean, we want children to be prepared to be able to lead us. And again, it's 2026, right? It's going to be 2026 in America. I mean, shouldn't you be able to have the education that's the right fit for you just by any means necessary at this point? I mean, we know so much more now that children can learn anywhere. I mean, like we talked about, they can learn online, they can learn in buildings. I've also seen families choose multiple buildings now. They might send their child to a community college for the calculus class and an AP class at their local high school and do math online with a specialized environment. I mean, that's the future of education. And so the way that this federal tax credit scholarship is designed, that it's a multi-use, right? You can use it for tuition. You could use it to get your technology that you need. You could use it for an online class. I think that's the future of education. And I know that all of us want to have well-prepared students who can lead us and take care of us in the future.
I love hearing you make it really clear what this is and what the vision is for this. I think some of us in Washington are maybe a little too immersed in the process and the details and need to pull back a little and reflect on. This is an exciting development. This passed as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in summer of 2025. It is law. It's a reality. It's happening. And we're at the implementation stage. And a big part of that implementation is going to be communicating, just as you have been, to potential donors and to families and to state leaders who need to opt in. This is exciting. This is good news. Let's do this.
It's so exciting. And I know that people want to contribute to children getting a great education. This is going to be a wonderful way to get that on their radar as something they may not have thought about, but they know they care about it, but they didn't have a mechanism before. And organizations like Children's Scholarship Fund, I mean, we're lean and mean, like 92% of the money's going right to kids. Our administrative costs are so low. I mean, all of us are here because we're dedicated to children and mission driven. And there's so many beautiful organizations operating all over the nation like Children's Scholarship Fund. And so definitely for your listeners, start to look in your community and see, is there a little Kate Baker Demers there running around trying to raise money for kids? Because, those people will likely be in states that opt in and then be able to create these programs that are, with the federal tax credit, of course, much more robust than they would be able to do, just fundraising in general. So it is really exciting. And I know that families, there's tons of need out there.
First, though, states have to opt in, and we need governors to follow the opt-in process that's being laid out by Treasury. Are you seeing good things on that front in your state?
It does seem like people are really excited about it. What I think will be interesting is, so you know geography of New England. I mean, New Hampshire is right next to Massachusetts. I mean, I can drive there in under an hour. So it's right there. I mean, New England is tiny. But I'm hearing that the governor of Massachusetts is questioning whether or not to opt in. Of course, it's very likely the governor of New Hampshire will opt in. And so what I don't understand is why a governor would choose not to opt in, because what they're saying in a state they don't opt in is that their donors could then contribute to scholarship granting organizations, but they're limiting who we can help. And so, for example, if someone was in Massachusetts and wanted to contribute to kids in Massachusetts, they could give us a contribution and say, give it to kids in Massachusetts, but the governor's making it so we wouldn't be able to. And so I'm just wondering kind of how they'll reconcile with that in the long run, that there's going to be people in their state who want to help children in their state. But if they don't opt in, they're not making it so that people can't donate. They're just making it so people like me can't give the money to the children there. And so, I hope that they understand that and kind of see the light in that regard and make it so that at least their own citizens of their state can invest in children in their own neighborhoods, because that's what everyone wants, to help kids in their neighborhood to have a great education. And so I'm hoping that every governor in the entire nation opts in, because they're just allowing people like Children's Scholarship Fund to give kids a little bit of assistance that they might need.
And sometimes this could be public school students who are receiving assistance for tutoring because that is one of the eligible expenses. So the idea of a governor not opting in and denying all students, including struggling public school students, this opportunity to receive funding to help them with their educational journey does seem really short sighted.
There's a lot of those students. We hear
Yeah,
from quite a few families who have children. They want to stay in their local district school, but they do need help with a technology scholarship or a tutoring scholarship. And so I agree with you that that is extremely meaningful to those families to be able to get assistance so that they can get the academics that they need and stay where they are. Also, that's also a form of school choice if you think about it, right? Staying where in the school that you're in, you're choosing that.
for sure.
But so I am hopeful that every governor in the whole nation will understand that it's private contributions. I hope they understand that.
Well, and hopefully we'll see governors taking action quickly. The Treasury Department has opened up the process by putting out the opt-in form, and they have taken in comments largely from a scholarship granting organization, SGO perspective, and are going through those comments. All of that will turn into a proposed rule or regulations, and then the governors will be putting forth their approved lists of scholarship granting organizations for each of their states. What are you hoping to see from the Treasury Department in 2026?
I'll be honest with you. So, having done this a couple of times now, right? I like expeditious rules that are clear and simple. That's all we need, I think, as scholarship granting organizations is quickly so that we can prepare and clarity so that we can implement the existing law and the regulations exactly how they want us to do it.
And you guys know how to do this. I think that's something that everybody needs to realize. New Hampshire's not alone in having a state tax credit program. There are about 2 dozen states that have them. So SGOs know how to do this and don't need extra layers
No,
of,
we're accustomed to operating under legislation and then with
Mhm.
rules and then with state departments that we work with. For example, in New Hampshire, we work with our Department of Revenue on the tax credit program, and our accountability rests there with reporting. And then on our education savings account, we work with our Department of Education, and our reporting and accountability rests there. So you're right. The scholarship organizations that exist in states do have experience working with many different types of departments, many different types of flavors of rules. And every state, of course, is a little bit different. But I think that the federal tax credit law is very simple, and that's a benefit because it doesn't need to be overruled or overregulated, so to speak. I think that it's they reference the Coverdell's for all of the expenses, so there's a lot there that I think could be I don't want to say easy to implement because it's never easy to implement, right?
Mhm.
It's always challenging to implement a new program, but it's definitely doable the way that they've written and the what it looks like Treasury will do.
Well, Kate, as we conclude, I do like to have my guests dispel education myths. You mentioned union opposition out there in your state from the early days of the education freedom programs. That makes me think you've probably heard a myth or two in your experience. So, is there a pernicious or pervasive myth that you'd like to tackle today?
I'm going to tell you something that bothers me. Sometimes in legislative hearings, I'll hear people say that they feel like low income families don't have enough information or resources or the ability to make these choices for their children. And the thing that I want to share is that families that struggle economically have the most skin in the game. These are families who want a different life for their child. They know what it is to struggle and don't want their children to struggle in the future. They are the families who spend the most time trying to find the best education option for them and the most time in dedicating resources and energy towards helping their children to have a successful life. And so low-income families with economic challenges should absolutely be empowered to make these decisions for their children. They know their children best, and their economic circumstance should never be a barrier to that.
Absolutely. How can people follow your work? How can they keep up?
Our website is nh.scholarshipfund.org, and our links to our Facebook are there and our Instagram. And, we post on LinkedIn, and we'd love to have anyone involved here in New Hampshire. It's an amazing state, and the families in our program are continually grateful to our governor, to our legislature, to the people that donate to the Scholarship Fund, being able to enable them to have education freedom.
Fantastic. Well, Kate Baker Demers, thank you for your commitment to education freedom, and thank you for joining Freedom to Learn.
Thanks so much for having me.
Freedom to Learn is a production of the Defense of Freedom Institute. Learn more about our work at dfipolicy.org. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Send feedback, questions, and episode ideas to podcast@dfipolicy.org. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow and review Freedom to Learn on your favorite podcast app and share it with a friend.